This is Sung, and I'm the principal and director of Sky Academy. And in this chapter, this whole unit of work, we've been looking at basic arithmetic, and in particular, what we have been doing, and what I want to do is give you the skills to be able to work within the real number system. Now, if you were paying attention in the last episode, we looked at the real number system as being a unified sum of all these other number systems that have been kind of collaborated into it, okay, or brought into it, okay? So for example, you had the cardinal numbers or the natural numbers, you had the rational numbers, you had irrational numbers, you also had integers, all right? So it's basically all these other number systems brought in together. This particular episode focuses on rational numbers, right? Which is a subset of the real number system. Now, with the rational numbers, basically there are three ways, all right, of expressing a rational number, all right? Those being a fraction, a decimal, and a percentage. Now, let me just take one step back here. What is a rational number? A rational number is basically any number that can be a comparison between two whole numbers, right? So if you've got one whole number P and another whole number Q, and you're comparing those two numbers together, P over Q or P2Q as P2Q as a comparison, right? What you have is what we call a ratio. See, that's called a ratio. And you see the word ratio in rational numbers, right? Or you have a fraction, yeah? And so you've got fractions, decimals, and percentages. They're your three main ways of expressing rational numbers. Your first one being a fraction, which is one number compared to another number, a top number compared to a bottom number, okay? Which is your fraction form. Your decimal form, which is an extension of your base 10 whole number system, right? So your base 10 whole number system starts with your unit column, and then to the left of that, you've got your tens column, to the left, yep, your hundreds column, your thousands column, your 10,000 column, etc. But when it comes to decimals, you're going the other way. You're going into numbers that are in between whole numbers, right? So you're looking at numbers that are broken up into tenths, hundredths, thousandths, right? Each digit or each place value being broken down by a factor of 10, okay? So basically a decimal is a rational number where your bottom number is expressed as a magnitude of 10, okay? Either as hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, etc. And then finally, you've got percentages. Percentages are basically where you are expressing your rational number to a standard bottom number of 100, right? And you might even see that in the word percent. All right, per cent. How many cents in a dollar? There's 100 cents in a dollar. How many runs in a century? Right? There's 100 runs in a century in the game of cricket. How many years in a century? Well, there's 100 years in a century as well, okay? So basically what we're doing is we're standardizing the denominator to the number 100, okay? And that's basically what a percent is, all right? Now, I guess the thing that we need to know is how to convert between fractions, decimals, and percentages. And I've basically got my roadmap or my conversion strategies for how to do that. All right, so let's have a look at fractions to decimals. How do you divide fractions to decimals? Basically, you take the top number, which is called your numerator. You take your bottom number, which is called your denominator. You take your top number and you divide by your bottom number. That will give you a decimal. So you put that in your calculator, and more often than not, it'll give you a decimal, right? Having a calculator is going to be really helpful for you, all right? It's going to make life a whole lot easier because on some calculators, in fact most calculators, there is a button that allows you to convert freely between fractions and decimals. Where you're converting between decimals to fractions, what you're doing is you're basically, and I'm going to explain it first because it might be hard to get, but then I'll demonstrate it. So when it comes to converting decimals to fractions, what you do is you write the digits in the decimal and you're on the top, and then you write the appropriate order of 10 that the decimal goes to on the bottom, and that will give you your fraction. Your top number being the digits in your decimal, and the bottom number being your appropriate order of 10. All right, and that'll give you your fraction. And sometimes what you need to do is take into account the fact that you need to simplify the fraction as well. So let me give you an example of what I mean. 0.51. The digits in the decimal on the top will be 51, okay? You don't have to worry about the 0 because 051 is still 51. On the bottom though, you want the appropriate order of 10, so the appropriate power of 10, and that is 1, and in this case you're going back 2 decimal places, so you're going 1 with 2 zeros. The number of zeros will be equal to the number of place values behind the decimal point, okay? So it's 51 over 100, yes? If you had, for example, 0.0051, you would have 51 over 1 with 4 zeros, yes? 1, 2, 3, 4, so it'd be 1 with 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros, yes? Just to be sneaky, if we were to have 0.50 instead of 0.51, we would end up with 50 over 100, which means that we can simplify, all right? If we can simplify, then that is exactly what we do. 50 over 100 simplifies down to a half, yeah? So that's my strategy for converting between decimals and fractions. Now, converting from fractions to decimals and decimals to fractions, that is the hardest conversion to do. Converting from decimals to percentages and percentages to decimals is fairly easy, as is converting from fractions to percentages and percentages to fractions. So let me quickly just go through decimals to percentages and percentages to decimals. With this, it's just a matter of shifting the number of decimal places 2 to the left or 2 to the right, depending on what you're converting from. So if you're converting from decimals to percentages, right, so let's say for example 0.51, all you need to do is shift the decimal point 2 to the right, 1, 2, and then you end up with the number 51, right? So the answer is 51%, right? Whereas if you are converting from, say, percentages to decimals, you basically shift your decimal point 2 to the left, 1, 2, and your answer is 0.73. And of course, with no number in front of the point, you're better off writing a 0 there, all right? So 0.73, okay? So that's how you convert from decimals to percentages. That's how you convert from percentages to decimals. And then the last one is how you convert from fractions to percentages and from percentages to fractions. Now, to convert from a fraction to percentage, you basically just multiply by 100. So let's take, for example, 3/4. Convert that to a percentage, you just multiply by 100%, okay? Now, or by 100. Now, what you end up with is 300 over 4. How many 4s are in 300? The answer is 75%, all right? So that's gonna be your answer. Or another way you can do it is how many 4s are there in 100? The answer is 25. 3 times 25, you go straight to 75, okay? And then the last one, how do you convert from a percentage to a fraction? Very simply, all right? Let's take, for example, 92%. 92% becomes 92 over 100. So percentage just means over 100, so we just express that percentage over 100. So it's 92 over 100. Sometimes we can simplify. In this case we can, and and we divide both top and bottom by 2, and we get 46 out of 50. We can divide by 2 again, and we get 23 over 50. Does that make sense? And so that's how you convert from fractions to percentages and percentages to fractions. Let me just quickly go through this table with you, and I'll go through this with lightning speed simply because I know that a lot of this stuff for you guys will be revision. But what I want to do is just go through some common ideas and reinforce it, drum it into you. If you feel like you're really confident with it, then just move on to the next video. But if you do require me to go through some more examples with you, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing here. So let's take this fraction a half. How do we convert it as a decimal? Well, what I would do is in your calculator, 1 divided by 2. All right, or you should be able to remember this as a fraction, this fraction as a decimal. A half is 0.5. Yes? All right, as a percentage, what we do, what is a half of 100? Right, it's 50%, okay? So it's 50 over 100 is equal to a half. Got it? All right, 25%. Right, as a decimal, it's just a matter of moving the decimal place back 2 spots. So it ends up being 0.25. 25 over 100 will be your fraction, which can be simplified to 1/4. Got it? 0.7, all right, as a percentage, we just move the decimal place 2 to the right. You've got an empty place there, so the answer is just going to be 70 because you fill that empty space or empty place value with a 0. So it's 70%. And as a fraction, it'll be 7 over, goes back 1 decimal place, so it's 1 and 1 0. Okay? 0.11 as a fraction would be 11 over 1 and 2 zeros. 11 over 100. All right, it's already a percentage, it's 11%. And the way we can check that is we move the decimal place 2 to the right. Does that make sense? And we end up with 11, okay? 30% is as a decimal, you move 2 to the left, 0.30. We don't need the second 0 on the end. We can actually leave the answer as 0.3. And that'll allow us to turn it into a fraction, 3 over 10, or 30 over 100, which becomes 3 over 10, okay? So 30% is 30 over 100, which becomes 3 over 10. 9 over 10 becomes 0.9. Just put it in your calculator, you can work it out. 9/10 of 100 is 90%, okay? Good. All right, so I know I went through that fairly quickly. I went through it quickly because this should pretty much be revision for you, okay? If you're struggling with it, okay, then I am willing to provide you with that extra assistance and help that you need through worksheets or some practice that you might get. Otherwise, ask your teacher at school. But that is a brief overview of fractions, decimals, and percentages. Thank you very much for watching. We'll continue on with rational numbers in the next couple of episodes. Thank you.